can't not feel. Your emotions show up in important moments and tag them. Your emotions show up in important moments and tag them. Emotions are on two sides, right? The opposite of loss, of course, is some level of connection. The opposite of sadness is some level of happiness. Emotions show up in moments and tag them. But we have the wrong idea about emotions. We're not willing to experience emotions. As I said before, we have two kind of habits in the presence of uncomfortable thoughts and experiences and uncomfortable emotions. We try to get rid of them. What happens when you try to get rid of something inside your head? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It goes from small to a little bit larger to a little bit larger until it's absolutely ginormous. And you're like, wow, that problem went from this big, right? Doesn't actually do it. So what do we try to do? We try to control things we can control. Well, when I feel bad, I have cake. I feel better. I also like cheeseburgers, occasionally some red wine, popcorn. I eat my feelings, and I feel pretty good while I'm eating. But because I wasn't eating because I was hungry, what happens? I keep eating. And as long as I'm chewing and swallowing and tasting, I feel good. What's the problem with that? I'm creating a habit. In the presence of badness, I'm increasing feelings of goodness by eating. Now that's how I cope. Some of you cope with an iPhone 12. Some of you cope with shopping, gambling, and some of you cope different ways. But we all choose to cope. There's a whole category of things we do by putting them into our body or consuming them or experiencing them to change. We decrease feelings of badness by increasing feelings of goodness. Now, every time an uncomfortable emotion comes along and I eat, I create a habit. This is how I become overweight. I'm speaking about myself, so. And I continue to do it every time I feel uncomfortable, and I'm only eating to change how I feel. It's over here. Increasing feelings of goodness by drowning my emotions or my uncomfortable thoughts in my experience. Okay, let's walk over to the other side. Sometimes when I have difficult feelings and emotions and or thoughts inside my head, instead of trying to drown them out with increasing feelings of goodness, I start to control and avoid. So I don't go places, I don't do things. Go to a party, start connecting with people, have an uncomfortable experience, and I leave. I start to feel better, unless I'm ruminating about it. And the next time that friend calls me and says, "You should come to this party," I say, no, not gonna happen. I can get away with not going to a party, but what if it's something more critical than a party? What if I have an uncomfortable experience and I stop swallowing? Or I stop eating? Or I work with a lot of kids, so I've got a lot of stories in my head. Sometimes I say something funny, and then I just have a story in my head. I was gonna say, what happens if I stop showering? I was like, what? Had a conversation with somebody about that the other day. It's like, I can't shower, it's awkward, so I just stand under the water. And I was like, yeah, but that doesn't get you clean. Right? In the presence of uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, we create rules about how to keep ourselves safe. This is a very natural, normal thing, right? You burn yourself in the stove, you avoid doing it the next time. You feel uncomfortable in a place, you avoid going there or experiencing the same thing under similar contexts. So you have these two experiences when you feel discomfort. I either do things to increase feelings of goodness, what I call numbing behaviors, and I can do that through drugs, alcohol, consumption of social media. I can do it through food. This is numbing. And then I have over here, I can avoid and I can control. Controlling is when I show up at the party and I take over. I tell everybody how it's going to go and what we're going to do. I mean, we can do that in more subtle ways, but when I have my little friends at work that do that, I call them kindergarten cops, right? Because they do it over the most ridiculous things, but they'll control anything. Like absolutely anything. You're like, you can't tell him what he wears. It doesn't happen. Those are our two choices. And those are reflexive reactions to our own experience because we don't know how to handle our thoughts and we don't know how to handle our emotions. Now, I'm not saying you can't have difficult thoughts, and I'm not saying that emotions can't be difficult. They absolutely can. But your life is held within them. So what happens if you try to avoid your own experience? You fail to have life. You live. Like you breathe, you eat, you go to the bathroom, the bio break. That's a great line, by the way. That wasn't you. That was... It's a great line. You fail to have life. You just live. You go through the motions, right? Comfort is probably the worst addiction we have. We have a belief that we should be able to do things that are difficult and stay comfortable. I work with all these kids who tell me they're pros. I'm a pro at that. Are you now? How did you get to be a pro? And what's a pro? Because in my head, a pro is somebody who's professional at something. And if you're a pro at skateboarding, you get paid to skateboard. They have this idea that they're amazing. They didn't put the work in. Anything worth doing is phenomenally difficult. It takes a while to get a practice going and to do it. But you could do it. You can't just say that you can do it. Right? There's an extreme difference between thoughts and actions. You understand that? There's a very critical differentiation. We'll walk here for a second. You think lots of thoughts. And we give a lot of power to thoughts. Okay? I think I have. Somebody gave me money to pay me back for something. So I've got a $100 bill in my pocket. Okay, so I put it in my pocket. Now, anybody who can think it out of my pocket can have it. Can you think it out of my pocket? You can think about it. We could all think about what we could do with $100. We could think about it. Can you actually move it out of my pocket with your thoughts? What is the only way it will get out of my pocket? Somebody would have to be brave enough to walk up a stage, join me, put their hand in my pocket, and take it out. Is that a thought or an action? It's an action. Actions are powerful. Thoughts are powerless. Often we give thoughts power, we fuse with thoughts, and they grow. So, we want to think about our journey, we want to think about what we're going to do. I know some of you are here for yourselves, and some of you are here thinking about other people in your lives. I want to give you a schema of things and a way to think differently, and then I want to talk about some practical things you can practice. And I have 62 minutes and 5 seconds to do it. We're going to go fast. Okay. There's an automatic life that we can have and just walk through the processes. It's not very fulfilling. To Sarah's comment, God is not really present in that life if we are just walking through the motions and not allowing ourselves to experience the life he has given us, and we are numbing ourselves with media and drugs and alcohol and all these other things, and over here avoiding and escaping experiences because they're difficult and uncomfortable. There's not life there. Those are our two automatic reflexive behaviors that happen in the presence of uncomfortable thoughts and emotions. Where is the path between those two things? I stopped to take a minute when I got here because I was feeling anxious and uncomfortable. I stayed in my car, listened to one more song, which lined right up with the comment that Sarah said. It's a line from David Crowder's song, Shepherd, which is, I will live for all my days in the shadow of your relentless grace. That song takes my breath away again and again. I will dwell for all my days in the shadow of your relentless grace. What is relentless grace? Relentless grace is a God who shows up in between our habits of avoiding our own life and tries to shepherd us through an experience if we are willing to pay attention to when he speaks through the Holy Spirit in our lives and calls us to do things. And he calls us in difficult moments. So, I'm trying to tell you a story and I'm going to cry before I do it. I'm going to tell you anyway. It's going to take me a second. 2.5 years ago, Three years ago on March 8th, it'll be 3 years on March 8th, I lost my best friend of 31 years. I'd agreed to go to Esperanza, which is a remote camp on the west side of Vancouver Island with my son's school, and be the speaker. I was going to speak about mental health, and I walked into one of the worst mental health crises of my life because I lost somebody. I was supposed to leave on the 11th. I lost my friend on the 8th. And I was supposed to go and talk to 40 teenagers about mental health and God's grace and his beauty and all of these things I had planned. And I lost my best friend very, very, very suddenly. And it shut me down. I had a really, really hard time because my son Jericho, I had pushed him to go, and he didn't want to go. And I had pushed. And then my friend died. And I didn't know how I was going to go, and I didn't know how I was going to back off on him going because he can go if I couldn't go. And yet, in the middle of those two things, I'm going to tell you the two things I wanted to do. I'm going to be honest, so don't judge me. Well, you can judge me because I can judge myself. I wanted to avoid it, so I wasn't going to the camp, and I wasn't going to speak for anything, and I was going to stay home and drink gin. Avoid the thing and numb. But I was faithful because God called me to go to camp, and it was hard. I had to speak in front of 40 kids on my late best friend's birthday. I had to be open, honest, and raw. And I had one of the hardest weeks of my life, and I had one of the best weeks of my life. God didn't give me what I wanted. God gave me what I needed. It was a very, very, very rich experience because I connected with a bunch of kids. And I was there to be the speaker, but I can tell you who got ministered to. And it wasn't just the kids. And how did that happen? Because I made a choice to walk between two typical responses in human behavior. Those two typical responses, and I say things over and over and over again because we need to hear them as a society. I chose not to numb, and I chose not to avoid. I chose to walk right down the middle in a valued direction. What are your values? What's something that's important to you? Anybody care about family? Health? Those are values, okay? We all have values. You all have different values. You have permanent values and you have satellite values, values that are things that are important to you every once in a while because something changes. But you have values. Our problem with thoughts and emotions is they're not really good indicators of our overall values and our overall well-being. When I feel sad, I want to feel not sad, so I do something to make me not sad. If I pick gin, I do something I call feeding the monster. Feeding the monster is when I feel sad, I do something to change how I feel, and the next time I feel sad, what do I want to do? Have gin. And if I continue to have gin every time I feel sad, what happens? Gin has me, right? Small, repeated actions have powerful outcomes. So if I believe that sad is wrong, and when I feel sad, I consume alcohol or eat cake, small, repeated actions have powerful outcomes. I become addicted to eating and drinking or avoiding certain things. I avoid all sorts of things, so don't feel like I'm judging you if you avoid things. I avoid my phone. Well, I avoid answering my phone and the emails and the texts. Susie will tell you that. Tracking me down is like playing whack-a-mole. Because I avoid it. That's an honest confession. There's a path in between. So let's talk about values. You guys can shout at some answers to me as we do this. You're going to McDonald's and you're hungry. What's your choice? A big meal. Okay? You're going to McDonald's and you're health conscious. What's your choice? Salad. Right? Or not McDonald's. Right? You're going to McDonald's and finances is your value. What's your choice? Cheapest meal. Right? Going to McDonald's and connection with a friend is your value. Does what you eat matter? No. Many of your behaviors are driven through values you're unaware of. We're secretly exposing you to a science called acceptance and commitment training or therapy right now. We're not purposefully doing it secretly. I started at the beginning of this conversation by talking about thoughts and problems and emotions, and then I was going to walk into acceptance and commitment therapy. But we just naturally slid into a conversation about values. Understanding what your values is drives your choices. When money is a struggle, oh, here's another good thing we really have to say. Did you know you struggle where you value? You struggle where you value. Think about something you struggled with. Think about something that's a struggle right now. I guarantee you it's tied to some, or one at least, of your values. When I fight with my wife, why do I care? Because of my values and because I love her. I'll say something that's not nice to make a point. If I didn't love her, would I care? No. Would it be a struggle? No. You struggle where you value. So if you're struggling with something, it's directly tied to your value. What's the problem if you don't know what it is you value? A struggle feels bad, and you choose to numb or avoid. What happens when you choose to numb or avoid? You perpetuate your own poor habits and choices. You're stuck. If you know what you value, or are willing to be curious about what you value, then it gives you an out. When I'm worried about money and I go to Starbucks, what am I going to buy? Nothing. I have to buy something. I'm going to get the cheapest thing I can get. I'm certainly not going to get the $12 Frappuccino my child tries to choose, the double chocolate chip super frappy. It's like 4,700 calories in a cup. Right? I had a friend. We were traveling together. We got to the hotel, and I went for the elevator. She went for the stairs. I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, getting my exercise in. I never take the elevator. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So I stopped taking the elevator. I followed her rule and started getting some exercise. I was like, wow, this is good. I'm getting exercise. I bumped into her 4 years later. I headed for the stairs. She took the elevator. Her values had changed. I followed her rule. Right? When we know what our values are, we can make small, repeated actions that have powerful outcomes. All right, so we're talking about this science called acceptance and commitment therapy. I'll open my computer in a second so I can give you some quotes and do some things. We're going to talk about 3 pillars in acceptance and commitment therapy. One is open, one is aware, and one is engaged. So we're over here on this side over here talking about being engaged. To be engaged, you need to know your values. Okay? If you know your values, you can pick little itsy-bitsy things to do in the service of your values. When I miss my wife, what's one thing I can do? Sorry? Call her. Text her. Buy her flowers. She doesn't really like flowers. She'd prefer a good dinner. Right? If I value exercise, what's one thing I can do? Go for a walk. Park further away. If you understand your values, sitting right underneath them are all these little committed actions you can do. We talked briefly about the idea of addiction and that small repeated actions have powerful outcomes. The same thing happens on the other side. Small repeated behaviors have powerful outcomes. Right? When I go to jiu-jitsu, there's a little sign that says in the bathroom, a white belt is a black belt is a white belt that never gave up. Small, repeated actions have powerful outcomes. I didn't ever think I could progress in martial arts. Small, repeated actions have powerful outcomes. You jump on my back, I'll put you on the floor. I'll probably do it without thinking because small, repeated actions become ingrained in our system. Now, small, repeated actions in terms of numbness, that just feeds addiction. Small, repeated actions in terms of avoidance, that feeds things like anxiety and depression, agoraphobia, all of these other things over here, loneliness. They're all fed on that side, right? And of course, they're sisters, because you can't have one without the other. But there is a path in between, and that path is driven by something that's called choice. When you have values and you know what your values are and something that's important to you, you can break it down to a choice, and you can make that choice in the service of a more meaningful life. Often I find God stopping me in moments and going, what? He does it through anxiety, right? Anxiety marks your brain, it stops you, grabs your attention. Anybody with anxiety would tell you that it feels good? I mean, I didn't like standing on the stage at the beginning. The first 5 minutes was terrible. I'm okay now. The beginning was not fun. It doesn't feel good. Right? I can feel it all over my body. Now I'm okay. We don't choose that feeling. And yet that feeling often shows up in important moments to grab our attention and say, hey, you've been here before. You didn't make a good choice. Maybe you'll make one this time. Like, oh yeah, cake. Oh yeah. Susie's texting me. I'll say no. Or, what are my values? So here's a question for you. I hate public speaking. I have performance anxiety. Why do I do it? Because God has laid on my heart that I have an important message to share. And so I am willing to share the message, even when it doesn't feel good. It's the same journey when I went to Esperanza after I lost my best friend. God laid on my heart that I had something to share. I think that was the hook. He just wanted to get me there so that I could minister to the kids and then they could minister to me. I left the camp to go and bury my friend, so I had to leave early. And those kids gathered around me and prayed for me and blessed me and gave me strength. And I am dearly attached to some of those kids. I got to go back the next year and baptize one of them in the ocean. Freezing. It was March. But he said, God has laid it on my heart. Esperanza is holy ground. I've been wanting to get baptized for a long time, and I've been avoiding it. Now I'm going to listen to God's call, and I want to do it here. I was like, well, here's the funny thing. I'm a mental health worker. I'm not a pastor. I ain't never baptized nobody, don't know how. So I texted my pastor and said, hey, somebody wants to get baptized. What do you think I should do? He's like, baptize him. All right. Again, I wanted to avoid. God called. If you understand your values and what's important, if you pay attention to the presence of the Holy Spirit in your life, which often comes from anxiety stopping us in some places, or our emotions, we realize we actually have a choice. I don't have to numb. I don't have to avoid. I can choose. If I know what my values are, I can make a choice in a valued direction. I'll tell you what happens if you make repeated choices in valued direction. Your life gets better. Sometimes other people's lives get better too, because the value you're choosing is something that everybody shares in community. At the core of every struggle, every person, I've been in this field for 25 years. I have worked with thousands of people with neurodiversity, disabilities, learning challenges, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, OCD. It's a long list. At the core is a struggle for worthiness and a desire for connection. At the core of every problem is a struggle for worthiness and a desire for connection. What happens when I am addicted and I'm over here drinking gin and trying to hide it? I lack authenticity, I lie, I connect with what? Gin. Gin's not a very good friend. When I avoid over here because I'm drinking gin, I don't go and see my friends and spend time with them, right? My life gets smaller, my struggle for worthiness gets bigger, I lack connection. Research has been done. Do you know what the opposite of addiction is? Certainly not sobriety. It's connection. You were created, designed, ordained, whatever you want to look at it from, whatever lens you want to look at it from, to be in connection, primarily with God, and secondary, with the people He's put in your life. When you understand your values and what's important to you, you start to open yourself up and share. But when you're struggling and you think you're the problem, what happens? You internalize, you shut down, you avoid, and then, I have a great idea, I'm going to move this. And I can stop doing that. And you find yourself in the middle, where there's a different path, a journey, where God is willing to shepherd you in. You're never going to be perfect. God didn't call you to that. In fact, you can't be perfect. Did you know that? Perfectionism hides shame. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did bad. When I feel shame and I frame it as I am bad, what's the problem? Me. How do you fix that? You don't. You are you. You can't change you. You've always been you. You always will be you. And if you're the problem and your focus on how and who you are is that you're the problem, there is no solution. But if we reframe shame as guilt, instead of I am bad, I did bad, where's the focus? On the behavior or the action, the thing I did. And what can I do? I can do different. Probably the two most powerful words in the English language. I can do different next time. I don't know if any of you are parents, but children can be a terrible thing. They make dumb choices. My son decided to push, this is a while ago, but my son decided to push my other son down the stairs while he was in his high chair. So Malachi's strapped in, and Jericho's like, this looks fun. Off he goes. I'm trying to catch Malachi, so I grab Jericho and I push him up against the wall, and I say, don't! It's the only time in my life I've seen a look on his face I was destroyed by, because he was scared of me. And as a dad, I did never, ever, ever, ever want to see that on my son's face, because I should be a rock for my kid. I scared him. Albeit maybe there was some justice. Malachi is still tumbling down the stairs. But I didn't like that feeling, the look on his face. I beat myself up for it for a while afterwards, until I understood I'd made a human mistake in the presence of difficult circumstances. I didn't need to feel shame. I was allowed to feel guilt, and I promised myself I would do different next time. Understanding my value, Jericho, not being scared of dad. The small action, I'll do it differently next time, and realizing that the discomfort, the emotion that I experienced, was directly tied to what was important to me. I felt like crap because I did something I didn't like. Nothing to do with anybody else. But paying attention to my own emotion taught me a lesson about my own value and something I wanted to do differently next time. My values are very, very important to me. Understanding them, paying attention to when my emotions pop up. Very, very important to me. People think I'm weird now. Maybe they always thought I was weird. Yeah, they probably did. I often pause. So people, how are you? What's the answer to how are you? Fine, good. You ever say fine or good when you're not fine or good? Probably 95% of the time, right? If you value authenticity, honesty, truth, those are values. If you value that, then you'll answer honestly. Sometimes that's a mistake. I've practiced that one. Not every cashier actually wants to know how you're doing. They just want to do their job. But I will tell you, in the service of authenticity, I've often told people how I am, and not everybody wants to know. I don't care. It's my value. If you ask me how I am, I will tell you, and you won't get a fine, and you won't always get a good. You'll get an honest answer. So I'll typically pause in the service of a value. Okay, we talked a little bit about values. That's over here on the engaged pillar. Over here, we have an open pillar. And the open pillar has two things. One's called acceptance, and the other is diffusion. Acceptance is the concept that given that you have what you have, fighting to not have it doesn't make sense. Given that you have what you have, fighting yourself to not have what you have doesn't make any sense. But it is a very natural, reflexive human behavior. I have the habit of eating when I feel discomfort. My inner critic says things like, I'm fat, I'm a loser, I'm no good. That's my inner critic judging me about my choices. I have those things. I can't not have those things. Those are my habits. They're a byproduct of other stuff in my life. So what is the point of fighting and beating myself up for having those? What does that do? It spins my wheels, wastes my time. Acceptance is the concept of being willing to have difficult things without fighting them. Acceptance is not subservience to difficult things and just blatant allowance of terrible things in your life. It's allowing them to be present without fighting them. It's allowing them to be present so you can be curious about them and understand them and make a different choice. Acceptance is the willingness to be aware of what you have without resenting yourself for having it so that you can inform your values and also the actions that might change that thing you don't like about yourself. Right? If I keep beating myself up for being who I am, I'm going to spend my life over here doing something that doesn't allow any change at all. But if I walk over here and go, I don't like eating cake when I feel uncomfortable. When I feel like eating cake, I can stop for a moment and pay attention. Why am I feeling like eating cake right now? This is the difficult thing in my head. What happens if you eat cake? You feed the monster. What happens if you call the person you fought? Say sorry. It's a hard thing as a dad. Have you ever had to say sorry to your kid? Sometimes I come home from work and I'm just in a foul mood. And Jericho will do something and I'm like, bah, 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 bah. And he's like, Dad, that's not even fair. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm your dad. And I'm like, I do care. You're right. This is unfair. Let me rethink that. Right? I need to be willing to have the difficult thing. My natural reaction is to dump it on somebody else. Blame, displacement of pain and suffering. And then choose something that is a meaningful value direction. Open, aware, and engaged. We talked about engaged a lot. Open, willing to have the things that you have. Diffusion. We talked earlier about our thoughts and our emotions and how they get sticky. Diffusion is kind of like perspective. Why do people go to counselors? They provide perspective. They listen to your story and they tell you what is actually happening, not what you think is happening. Right? Because often I go in and I'm like, bah, 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 and I talk to my counselor and he's like, whoa, you did all of these things. That's not bad. And it's like, well, I should have done this and I should have done that. It's like, what? You did this. He provides perspective. Diffusion is the ability to create space between our thoughts and ourselves in the service of perspective. Perspective is awareness. Anybody ever have weird thoughts? Anybody ever worry about your thoughts? Anybody ever fight with your own thoughts? I've had full-on arguments with my wife in my head. I got up and got mad at her, and she's like, "Why are you mad at me?" And I was like, "Because we fought." No, we didn't. "Yeah, we had this whole argument." She's like, "No, we didn't." Well, right, that was in my head. I was resenting you for this, and I was feeling bad about that, and I was thinking about this. Again, let's go back to that $100 bill. How do you get it out of my pocket? Through thoughts or through actions? Actions. Diffusion is creating space between you and your thoughts. And it's a practice of awareness. Oh, I'm noticing that I'm feeling fat. What's important to me in that moment? My health and well-being. Now, if I focus on the fact that I'm fat, what am I likely to do? Feel bad about myself and eat cake. Is that going to help my fatness? It's not. In fact, I'm going to eat some cake and then feel bad about myself, so what am I going to do? Eat more cake. But if I don't choose that because I have some space between me and my thoughts or me and my emotions, I can sit in the center pillar, which is awareness. And awareness is the space where I can create space between my thoughts and feelings and being engaged, knowing my values and making choices related to them. Awareness is paying attention on purpose. Right in the middle. It does, and I'm going to keep eating it. I don't eat cake when I want to change how I feel. I eat cake when it's my dad's birthday. I eat cake when it's time to celebrate, or when it's time for dessert. I don't eat cake in the presence of difficult emotions. I definitely don't drink alcohol in the presence of difficult emotions, because it feeds the monster. And I want to feed the monster. I want to walk in the presence of God, where I'm being shepherded to go, so that I can thrive and have a meaningful life as he guides me by understanding my values and making small choices. Let's talk about awareness for a moment. Open, engaged awareness is right in the middle. How much time do we have? Not today, but in general. How much time do you have? You don't know. In fact, we're going to boil it right down to the fact that time doesn't actually exist. You can't touch the past, nor can you touch the future. You can only touch the now. You have 1 second at a time for as long as God gives you that second for the now. There is actually no future. This is a really weird way to think, but there's a reason. There is actually no way to touch the future. Because as soon as you're in the future, it's actually the now. Right? Nor can you touch the past because it's all done. The reason we talk this way is because I only have to pay attention right now to what I'm being led to do by God, or by some very basic things that need to occur in my life, and then make choices based on my values in the direction of those things, versus ruminating about all the mistakes I did in the past, or worrying about all the things that are going to happen in the future. Now, I can use the past and the future to inform how I act in the now, but what I can't do is pretend like I'm going to do it later. Right? Because what happens? Okay, I'm done eating cake. I'm going to join the gym as soon as I lose 10 pounds. I mean, come on, that's everybody's logic in so many problems. I'm $15,000 in debt. Feeling pretty bad about myself. I'm just going to buy 2 more things. And then I'm going to come back and pay it all off. Because the vacation will make me feel better because I'm going to eat cake and drink gin. Right? Versus The discomfort of knowing I need to buckle down and do some work right now because I can't afford a vacation. And if I keep spending my money on vacation, I'm not going to get any more cake. I'm going to be eating ramen, and ramen is not as good as cake. There's a spot where you can walk right in between your reflexive behaviors. It requires some awareness of the things that you struggle with over here, because you struggle where you value. And if you pay attention to what you struggle with and have a little distance from it, you can walk over here and go, yep, I'm struggling. I feel like crap. Not eating cake. I'm struggling. What am I struggling with? I'm struggling with my relationship with my friends. True story. Struggling with my relationship with two of my friends because they left their partners for each other. Couldn't figure out why I was struggling. Well, sorry, I'll back that up, take that back. I knew why I was struggling, but I didn't know how to communicate about it. So I got so fed up, I jumped in my car on Friday and drove 5 hours to see them and sat down with them and then had a 4-hour conversation and drove 5 hours back. What I wanted to do was continue to struggle, choose cake. What I chose to do was the hard thing. Walk in a valued direction, drive 10 hours, have a conversation. My wife said, "Did you tell them what you needed to tell them?" I said, "I said what I needed to say, and I feel better. I'm not carrying it." Some irony in, I do need wrist surgery. I'm waiting. My hands are desperately sore right now. I was talking to somebody about it. She said, "I understand that part of the problem with your hands is you can't let go." I said, "Yeah. I grip the steering wheel. I hold onto things tight when I'm doing it. Like I have this problem." She's like, "Yeah, you do. That's your hands. But what's in your head?" It's like, oh. Okay, I'm a counselor and a behavior analyst. You're not supposed to analyze me. Nor are you supposed to, in the name of God, say profound things to me that I have to then think about. It's that verse in Psalms, "Be still and know I am God." The actual translation is not "be still," it's "let go and know I am God." I avoid, that's my natural reflex. I numb, my natural reflex. Be still and know I am God. Let go and know I am God. There is a valued path in between, which is your Christian experience in Christ, where he will lead and guide you if you're willing to have it. If you guys want to study more about acceptance and commitment therapy, you can. It's based on a principle called psychological flexibility. Psychological flexibility is the most robustly associated the presence of psychological flexibility robustly measures with every measure of well-being that we know of, versus psychological rigidity, which is associated with all sorts of things like anxiety, depression. It's a thing you can practice through committed actions, openness, awareness, and engagement that you can build as a habit. Small, repeated choices have powerful outcomes. That's a thing you can do. But I want to walk through the idea of doing this in a very practical way and give you some ideas. Because I want you to leave today with things that you can do. Small practices. 1, humans need connection. I've got a news flash for you. Your phone does not produce connection, it produces addiction. If you want to connect with another human, you need to do it face-to-face. You need to have a conversation. There's a reason I drove 10 hours to have a conversation, because the text messages were not cutting it. And I saw my friend's heart, and I saw his pain, and I understood why he was lashing out. Can't do that on the phone. As humans, we have lost the ability to connect with each other and with God. There are many, many ways you can connect with God. You can do it through groups, come to stuff like this, through worship, through prayer, through Bible reading. There are many ways you can connect. As humans, you were created for connection. You know the only way you can make somebody literally go crazy? Permanent isolation. Not allowing them to connect. Humans need connection. Humans also need variation and change. If we always experience what we have experienced in the past, we become complacent and we end up in a spot where we don't know how to get out of what we do. The way you program that, if you're thinking about yourself or with kids, make small changes in your life. Go and do something different. Eat somewhere else. Make something different. Start a new hobby. I fix motorcycles. Never fixed a motorcycle in my life. People are like, wow, you're amazing. Where did you learn this? I was like, I didn't. I was aware I needed a different coping strategy. I had broken motorcycles available to me. I had some tools. I took some time. I'm doing something different. Driving my wife nuts because I'm collecting broken things. But it makes me happy. I was out there the other day with my nephew, and we fixed an ATV that had been broken for 3 months. And I took it further apart than I probably should have taken it. And I put it back together and had some extra pieces. And then I got to the end of it, and I was like, put it back together. And my nephew tried to start it, and it fired up, and we shrieked. We did something together, connected. We did something that was meaningful to the two of us. We had an emotion that was exciting. My wife came into the garage. What's going on in here? And we're like, it works. Human experiences. Stop comparing yourself. You need connection. You need variation and change in your life. You need to stop comparing yourself. You are all on journeys. The purpose of your journey is between you and God. But you are never going to be on the same journey as somebody else. You're never going to have the same experiences. You're not ever going to do, the same things as them. Nor are you going to be like them. But comparison is driven by the inner critic, by the fall of man, and we do it constantly. It's useless. What is useful? So what happens when you compare yourself? I feel less. I'm not as good as you. I'm going home. I'm going to eat cake. It's not untrue. In the absence of comparison, if I just let my brain be, pay attention to the thoughts that are worthwhile, I can choose things that allow me to walk in meaningful directions. Humans need exercise. Any amount of mental health in your life, humans need exercise. We were not meant to be sitting in classrooms. You probably weren't meant to be sitting in this chair for an hour and a half listening to me stationary. Humans need to move. Your body was designed to move and be active. Your body will heal itself. The number of neurochemicals released into your bloodstream when you do 20 minutes of cardiovascular exercise is ridiculous. Comparative to a reasonable dose of antidepressants. That's scary. 2013, there was 213 million prescriptions for anti-anxiety meds. There was only 200 million Americans. 13 million more prescriptions than there were Americans. Not judging medication, just saying, God created your body to have things that you can do, i.e. get active and move, which better your health. GABA, amino, butyric acid, right? Things required for impulse control, memory, all sorts of things related to keeping you calm and regulated. We need exercise in our lives, but it's not our natural inclination. You have to choose to do that. 20 minutes, cardiovascular, as much as you can handle. Keep your body moving and active. It produces chemicals in your body you need to manage your own feelings, emotions, and experience, and it has an ongoing cumulative effect. Exercise is good for you. You were designed that way. The more you move, the better your body feels. It's a fact. It's science. I'm sorry. Cardio sucks. I hate it. That's why I wrestle for fun and choke people out. It's a lot more amusing. I'm not lying. My wife's like, you're feeling grumpy today. You should do jujitsu. And I was like, yes, I should. Choking people out is not only calming and regulating, but it's a lot of fun. It's okay, it's consensual. Sorry. Humans also need to practice compassion. Compassion is empathy and action. Empathy. I can imagine how you feel. When I told you the story about losing my best friend after 31 years, some of you felt what I felt. Some of you imagined what it would be like to lose somebody. Lots of you have lost people you love, there's no question. Empathy is, I can imagine how you feel. Action is, I'm going to do something in the service of remediating how you feel. I spent 2 years practicing compassion. I found people to be kind to. Random people, people I loved. I imagined how they were feeling, and then I did things. And I did it for a very, very selfish reason. I did it because once upon a time in a service, somebody said, love your neighbor like yourself. And I said, my neighbor's screwed. So I spent 2 years loving other people. Why? To create a habit. Why? Because I needed to learn how to treat myself with compassion. Again, mental health and compassion are inversely related. If you can love yourself in an appropriate manner, thank you, you can impact your mental health. Your ability to love yourself is significantly related to your mental health. But I practiced on other people first. Maybe that's a little weird. But I did it because I wouldn't do it for myself. But here's how it worked. I'd show up and go, oh, man, you told me that story. I'm sorry. That must have hurt. I'd like to do this. Is that okay? I would like to bring this into your life or give you this or just have a conversation with you. Because that's what I feel like you need right now. Would that be okay? And they would often say yes. I practiced it for 2 years, and then I'd show up and go, oh, that was just like when I was with you. But I'm doing it. What kindness do I need in this moment? If Nate was going to be nice to Nate, what would the nice thing be? Not the behavior driven by the inner critic who's calling me an idiot. What would be the nice thing to do for Nate? Nate would take a day off. Yeah, he would. We should be nice to Nate. Nate will be in the garage, fixing motorcycles, not eating cake. Compassion. Humans need connection. Humans need exercise. Humans need variation and change. Humans need compassion. They need to connect with each other. These are all really, they're not bizarre. They're like big concepts, and I'm like, oh, I'm talking about all these things. You can simplify it. Pick one thing. Practice it for a while. Come back, have a conversation. Practice exercise. Get your body moving. Feel the results of what does your body do when you use it in the way that God intended. Then create another practice. Practice compassion for a while. If you're not nice enough to yourself, do it to somebody else for a while. They'll like it. Then when you're ready, practice it on yourself. Small, repeated actions have powerful outcomes. There are crazy people in this world who do amazing things. I was obsessed for a while with this guy who has no arms and no legs because he climbed Kilimanjaro. Did you hear the part where he has no arms and no legs? I'm an able-bodied human, and I don't think I could drag my carcass up Kilimanjaro. But he had a mindset. He had a goal. He did small, repeated actions until he got there. Kilimanjaro is not where he started, but he didn't give it up till he got it done. That's an amazing thing. There's another guy I was researching for a while. He only fosters kids who are terminal. He only chooses to love people that he then has to say goodbye to. Because nobody else will do it. And because he has enough perspective, he can learn to love them for a period of time, cope with the emotions, and then do it again, because that's what God has called him to do. God has called you to do something. I'm not going to tell you what that is. That's his job, not mine. But I will tell you, if you spend most of your life numbing or avoiding instead of thriving, you're going to live, not have life. I don't know what the purpose of my life is. I try to do many, many things. God uses doors to, God opens and closes doors. I often pray that God will hit me with the door so that I'll pay attention and actually choose the thing that he's choosing for me. God gives me all sorts of opportunities. It's not my responsibility to evaluate the effectiveness or the purpose. He puts me in places at times. God sent me to Esperanza to be with those kids because I needed it. And he gives me stuff I'm not deserving of. But if I am faithful and listen to the presence of the Holy Spirit in my life and choose to not numb or avoid, I make choices that are impactful for me and for other people, based on my values, my Christian faith, my willingness to have difficult things, and my presence in this moment and saying, hey, God has given me life. He's faithful to carry me through it. If I pay attention, there is going to be deep, rich experiences. And some of my favorite moments now involve difficult things that God has given me, because I had the awareness to not blame myself for the fact that being human is hard. When we blame ourselves for being human is hard, when we blame ourselves for the fact that being human is hard, we often hide ourselves. Close in, you can't see. And then you show up, we have a conversation. How are you? I'm good. How are you? Good. Nice to see you. Let's have coffee sometime. Sure. Why not? Done. Stop. But then I show up in a moment, I was like, man, this is my heart. This is what's going on in my life. And the person I talked to was like, wow, that's a lot. It's like, yeah, I know. Not sure what to do. Me neither. Let's sit together. Let's pray. Let's think about it. I'll walk with you. I'll help you. Let's do it together. Humans at the core, we need connection. Let's talk about worthiness one more time, just for a minute. Where is your worthiness found? In the God who chose for you to walk on this earth at this time in this place with these people around you. That's the anchor for your worthiness. God's placed you here. You have a reason. My wife is scared to death that I'm going to walk into traffic, get hit by a car. I was like, it's okay. She's like, what do you mean it's okay? And I was like, God still has purpose for me. I still have time. When I run out of purpose, he'll take me home, I'm good. But for now, I have purpose. I'm not going to die. And if I do, then my purpose was done, and you'll be okay. God has purpose for each one of us. We don't get to evaluate his choice in our presence here. What we do get to be is faithful and willing to have the journey that we've been called to. Sarah's question to me at the beginning of this was, how is God present in the middle of mental health? How is he absent? He is only absent when we choose to look at these things over here. One of my favorite stories is when Peter has the gusto to get out of the boat and walk to Jesus. Who does that? Eyes on Jesus. I know what he wants for me. I am not looking at what people are saying. I'm not looking at the difficulty of my own life. I am looking at the fact that a holy God has called me to be here. And he is going to sustain me until I am sanctified and stand in his presence. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to know all the answers. I need to be willing to be. aware of his calling in my life, and willing to have difficult stuff. Anything worth doing is difficult. As humans, we make the assumption that difficult things should be easy. Babies fall 4,000 times before they make their first successful step. 4,000! As adults, you guys are often one and done. You show up, you try something, you're like, oh crap, that was hard, man. I'm never doing yoga again. My core sucks. You see that sweaty guy next to me? I'm done. Right? Love working with kids because they're so honest. I was working with a guy with autism. He's like, I can't play sports. It's 95% talent and 5% effort. I'll never be good at that. I have no talent. I said, you have no perspective. Because it's actually probably 5% talent and 95% effort, right? Babies, 4,000 times, one successful step. Usain Bolt trained for 8 years for 4 seconds in a race. 4 years for 8 seconds in a race. And we, most of us who consume media, are one and done. I went to the gym, I lifted. I don't look like The Rock. I'm not going back. I feel bad about myself and eat more cake. This is not the life that God has called us to. God has called us to walk into difficult moments. Some of my favorite things is to sit down with kids in difficult moments and hear their hearts, and then explain to them what their values are, and then teach them how they can take action around those values. Tell them that they're not the problem. So let's do that today. You guys all have values. You live in a world with a society that makes it difficult. We look for immediate satisfaction, and we consume it, become addicted to it. That is not what you've been called to. God has called you to be present in this world, to understand your values, to understand his grace, and to take small repeated actions in this present moment to live differently. I often hear kids say, yeah, I'm not normal. Kids don't like me. I'm not normal either, buddy. In fact, normal doesn't really exist. Well, it's a button on my washing machine. But otherwise, it doesn't exist. What does exist is a diverse world full of people who are hurting. And you have a choice as humans. You can show up in that moment. You can be open and carefully share your hurt in the service of connecting and being present as you're called with other people, building your own worthiness in God's name. And you can hear other people struggle and share together, move in meaningful directions. Or you can do what some of you are doing, and I do it too, so again, I'm not judging. You can continue to pretend, put on the mask you put on, and walk around doing what you've done, and struggle with that feeling of meaning. Change is, it's difficult. But here's the thing. You can take baby steps. You can start now with small little things that you want to shift in your life. God will be faithful. And as you start to walk, you'll start to stride, and striding will become running, and running will become sprinting, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm good at jiu-jitsu. Because I spent time doing it. Oh my gosh, I'm good at connecting with humans. Because I spent time doing it. I'm not bad at compassion either. Because I practiced it for a while, and now I'm doing it to me. Because I need it. There are many, many, many things that you can do in this world that you've been called to do. I will tell you that numbing and avoiding will consume your time and energy. But walking down the middle, understanding what your values are, the things that are important, and taking small repeated actions to get there, will build a robust, powerful repertoire of new habits in your life. It takes 66 days to change a habit. You got that. Small repeated actions, and if you can't do it alone, get in a group and do it with people. Connection is powerful. This is why groups like AA and other support groups like this group are powerful, because you're all here for a reason, connecting around a purpose. Do it together. Everybody's got a struggle. That's not what's wrong with you. That's what's human about you. Push for something more meaningful in your own life. Christ wants to be present. He wants to help you thrive. I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to take a bio break, which I think is an awesome. And then we're going to come back and do a Q&A. Yeah. Okay, let me pray quick. God, in your grace, move in our hearts to understand how deeply you love us, how amazing your care and compassion for us is. Sustain us, teach us, find us faithful, but mostly give us a space to connect with other people who are struggling so that we can struggle together and understand that it is okay and that you are going to be there to walk with us as we struggle. I pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Nate, I'm going to start with one of my own questions here. And you touched on this right at the end when you're talking about worthiness and God, and how ultimately our worthiness comes from being known by God, being chosen by God, being loved by God, and given a purpose by him. And that's so important, I think, for us as Christians, as humans, to know that. How does that help us? Maybe kind of nitty-gritty here. How does that help us? Because that sometimes can feel like a very rational thought in my head. How does that help translate into feeling that worthiness and knowing that worthiness in dealing with some of the anxiety that we might suffer?
Yeah, good question. Primarily, you can't not have anxiety. You can't not have the emotions. So my first correction typically is, you're going to have emotions, you're going to have anxiety. That's a natural human response. It's when we start to resist the emotions and the anxiety that they often get amplified, and we make difficult choices within behavior. So for me, I try to anchor myself in the idea that God is responsible for the overall direction of my life, and that my worthiness comes from him. So when I find myself in those moments of struggle and difficulty and judgment, it decreases the pressure on me. I'm going to do my best, God, in this moment, and if this is not the correct thing that I need to do in this moment, I understand you're going to step back into my life and continue to pull. Because that's what an anchor does. It roots you where you need to be rooted. And I'm not always the right person I can't always make those choices myself. So my second choice would be then to connect with people I know are godly people in my life, and seek wisdom and seek additional resource to know that the choices in the direction I'm going continue to be rooted in God. Because it's hard. Being human is hard. I'll say it again and again.
Being human is hard. It's true. Yes, I have 42 years of experience knowing that being human is hard. Yeah. Thanks, Nate. That's good. And I think you touched on that in that answer, that it's not just in our own heads that we remind ourselves of that worthiness, but we have people around us that help us remind us. And I think, as a pastor, I think that's one of the things that church should be, that we come together to remind ourselves of that, and that we experience that together. Okay, question here. What if you can't change the thing that you don't like about yourself? For example, a physical illness, or the grief, anxiety it causes others. So sometimes, you're dealing with, you were talking a lot about behaviors and things that we might be able to change. What if it's something that you don't actually have a control over changing? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's acceptance. Given that you have what you have and you can't get rid of it, are you still going to take steps towards a meaningful life in the service of Christ, the service of your own life? Because that's what acceptance is. I have things I can't get rid of, and they're going to stay. I can change the amount that they create suffering, the pinch, the pain, but they remain. And given that they're going to remain, can I have them and still pay attention? Because often my focus is here. But given that they're there, Can they stay there while I continue to make steps? That's the hard concept, but that's the core, which is, yeah, you have things that you can't get rid of. Lots of people do, and I'm not trying to diminish the fact that they exist at all. People have trauma, people have, chronic pain, all of that stuff. But our choice essentially is, will you have a meaningful life? And if you want to have a meaningful life, understand your values and take small steps towards them.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so the acceptance piece is really huge, no matter what you're dealing with.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. This is a question here. What's someone or something other than yourself that has helped you the most in your recent journey? So yeah, what's you shared some personal stories, obviously, which was great. But what's someone or something that's helped you?
Yeah. Right now I'm latching onto family. I had about 4, for me at least, significantly traumatic things that happened at the same time. Lost my best friend, about 3 other things happened. And that significantly impacted me. And so I've just been latching onto family. My wife has a huge extended family. Working on serving and connecting and finding meaningful connections with family and it has been a critical component of me being well. People to talk to, people to serve, people to connect with, people to play with. That's the other thing. Humans need to play. Adults forget how to play. If you need to learn how to play, hang out with a kid. They're ridiculous, but it's fun.
Yeah, amen to that, Nate. I've got 3 young kids, and they help me play, and it's good. It's good for me. I'm really thankful for that time I get to have with them. What's the difference between anxiety and fear? What's
good
different
question.
Emotions, same thing, different labels? What's the difference?
Fear is something you experience when danger is present or imminent. So the bear is here and it's coming towards me. I experience as a human emotion, I experience fear. Anxiety occurs when I'm in a similar space or place to where I saw the bear that created the fear. And it happens automatically. It's not something we choose. So we often have anxiety in places where we've had an experience or where we've heard somebody else share about something that was tragic or fearful or harmful for them. And then we experience anxiety in a similar circumstance because we anticipate we might experience it. So fear is the danger is imminent, it's happening, you're getting into a car accident. Anxiety is you have difficulty driving because you saw a car accident, your friend explained a car accident, or you're in a place similar to where you had a car accident.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Nate. That's helpful, differentiating between those two. Got more questions coming in, trying to stay on top of them here. Why do you think anxiety seems to be on the rise, kind of in the general population, but particularly among kids and teens? You mentioned you work with kids, and just hearing from educators, from parents, like that seems to be such a huge epidemic almost of kids and teens struggling with anxiety that we haven't necessarily seen before. I've got some thoughts around that, but what would you say are some of the reasons? And is there anything we can do about it?
That's a big question. That's a big question because there's many reasons why we as a society are changing. But at the core of it is the belief that we as humans are the problem and the reason why we feel it. A good example would be when I was taking my son to the hospital and he was going to get stitches. He said, "I can't go, Daddy, it's going to hurt. And my automatic response was, "No, son, it won't." And then when he hears that, what he internalizes when he actually experiences the pain of being sewed back together is there's something wrong with me. We are part of a society that perpetually lies to each other and to our children, and they believe that they are the problem, and so they experience aversive stimulation inside as a byproduct of realizing and comparing that they're not as good as all of these people who are, kind of pretending to. It's more complex than that, but at the core, that's a huge piece of it is, we need to be open and honest carefully with our kids about how hard things are. And that, it's interesting now because an evolution of how I practice, but now when I work with kids, I tell them my goal is to teach you to be a problem solver. You're going to have problems. You are not the problem. You will have problems. Your ability to solve problems and continue in a valued direction is indicative of your success. If you take the problem personally and think you are the issue, you're going to shut down. And so often I will take kids out and I will try to create a single experience where they overcome something so they have a frame of reference for how problem solving happens. And that might be like swimming in cold water or jumping off a diving board or doing something that they think they're not capable of and teach them how to experience it so they have a frame of reference for other problems. Most kids, once they've had an experience like that, even adults, they can touch back and go, I did that hard thing. I'm good at that.
That's great, yeah. We should all take a cold plunge.
It's so good for you.
It's so good for you, yeah, and overcome that fear of the cold water. Here's a question. Our Living Well group that we do together with Jericho Ridge Church is both for people who are struggling with their mental health personally, but also for family members who are walking alongside them. And so, one of the questions here is, what's one thing, or what are some things I can do for a family member that's struggling with depression, anxiety, maybe even suicidal thoughts?
Yeah. Of course, depression and anxiety are easier to work with than suicidal ideation. Anybody who is suicidal, that is, a good connection with mental health and mental health professionals if you think that suicide is at all imminent or probable. Suicide also comes up a lot in kids and teens because they don't understand their own emotions. And so when they're in, often I have kids who come in and they can explain they're overwhelmed, but their solution for being overwhelmed is to not be, which they explain as suicide. They're often not suicidal, they're just looking for a solution to problems. People with anxiety and depression, probably a few things I would do with people who have anxiety and depression. This is what I do. I connect with them. Primarily, I will get them out and get them active. We'll go for walks, anything we can do together. Connect and exercise is my primary goal. The second thing I would do is learn as much as I can about anxiety and depression, just so that I can help people understand what they're going through. Just very simple understanding. Because if you explain something, the number of times I have explained disorders to kids and they were like, really? That's what's wrong with me? Oh, I just thought I was stupid. Like, that's terrible. That is terrible that you are a 15-year-old who thought you were stupid. So I teach them about it as much as I can. So I will show up, be with them, connect with them, teach them about anxiety and depression, and then try to connect them with other people. Connection, activity, those are primary remediation for anxiety and depression, and then novelty and activity is another thing that you build in. But you're looking for a group of people, not you. You're not enough. You're special, but not enough. Like, if you're going to really help somebody, you can't take all that pressure on you, or it also becomes a problem for you. So try to connect with a small group and come up with activity, connection, simple connection. So watch a movie together, right? That kind of stuff.
That's great, Nate. Yeah, thanks. And I think that just speaks again to the heart of our Living Well group is coming together to share those stories, share those experiences, support each other in that, and yeah, bringing other people into the journey as well. So it's not just you personally or you as a caregiver, but you're bringing other connections in, developing those connections. Question kind of at the top of the list right now is, and you've kind of addressed this already a little bit, but how do you sit in anxiety and trust God whilst the source of your anxiety is out of your control? And I want to say our anxiety in some ways is maybe always, well, I'll let you answer it, but I'm...
Go ahead.
No, you go. You go, Nate. You're the expert here, so we want to hear from you.
Yeah. Anxiety is out of our control, but part of that problem is to stop fighting with the fact and realize if you're anxious, it's because important things are happening in that moment. Often when we fight with anxiety, it amplifies, it gets big. There's a physiological component to anxiety, which is what exercise remediates. So if anxiety is really punchy, and I know it gets punchy, I've had panic attacks, I jaw clench, my chest tightens, I get sweaty, I am tense all over my body. I need a physiological outlet. I need to move, run, be active, and then I have a little more rationality, and my anxiety isn't so irrational in the sense of like sorting through it. And then when it pops back up, I'm like, this is important to me. Therefore, this is the value. Here is the next thing I do, and I'm going to commit myself to it. So anxiety is going to be present for the rest of your life. I'm going to be an anxious human. I am not going to like performing or being on stage, but I will continue to do it because there are important and meaningful things. And you have to, we align ourselves. It's like, you're not going to get rid of it. You're going to change how it feels, change your perspective of it, but it's not going to go. And you wouldn't want it to. Because if it did, you'd stop paying attention. You'd stop being aware of some of the most important things in your life.
Okay, so it's not about getting rid of it. It's about being aware of it, being open to it, and then making some choices to how do we respond to it.
Yeah, think about it like a knife. You hold the wrong side of a knife and continue to squeeze, it really hurts. But if you hold the right side of a knife, and it's always going to be in your hand, it can be a pretty powerful tool that informs and helps and chooses. It's still a knife. It's still going to hurt because you'll slide back into grabbing it wrong again. But you can adjust and pay attention. It's like, yeah, it's going to be there. Hold it right.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Nate. Had a question here, just kind of a resource question, and again, for if you haven't gone out to look at the tables out there, some of the counselors and groups that are present, I know a number of them have some great resources out, either things that you can take or books that they would recommend, things that you can, I don't know if they're selling anything today, but at least some recommendations. So there's some great resources out there already, but Nate, are there any books that you would recommend, or authors, it doesn't have to be a book, that you would say, this is a good book on anxiety, or
sure,
maybe an easy approach to the kind of the therapy that you were talking about, acceptance and commitment?
Yeah, there's a book called Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life. It just walks through identifying some of your values and some of the things you've struggled with. Gives you some exercises to practice around anxiety. Written by Stephen C. Hayes quite a few years ago. He has another one that just came out about a year and a half ago called A Liberated Mind. I haven't read it yet. The concepts are psychologically sound. He's got an evolutionary perspective of the human race, and so you won't find a core Christian. But the science piece of it is sound, and you can allow God to lead you through the center of that in terms of the actions you choose. There's lots of available podcasts and things on YouTube related to acceptance and commitment therapy, so you can learn about the 6 core concepts there and start small practices. Yeah.
Okay, it's a good starting point.
A little starting point.
No, that's good.
You can come up and ask me after, and I'll think of some more.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions here. Sorry, they're coming in. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anyone's recent questions here. So maybe kind of 1 more question here, kind of related more to church and community. What do you see the place as the church, the gathering on Sunday, but the church as a whole, right? The family of God, in helping people walk through anxiety and kind of, what's the communal church piece in this?
Yeah. I mean, church has responsibility in terms of connection and opportunity to connect. Church has many, many different functions in terms of, opportunity to serve, which is meaningful for connection, opportunity to be mindful and practice paying attention on purpose through prayer, through worship. The practice of worship is very powerful on just focused connection on God while singing. The church, it has very core functions in terms of, leadership, pastors, and other leaders within the church that you can go and chat with and connect with if you haven't, connected with counselors in that mental health journey. But ultimately, the church is the core interpreter of God's word and God's presence in our life, and so we need to be anchored to that, because on our own, we don't do a good job. And we need people. The church has good people. Not perfect people, that's okay. Good people.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Nate. What does it mean that my emotions are often subdued? Is this person kind of asking, sometimes it's hard to actually pay attention to our emotions because they're so subdued. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, we live in a society where we create habits and rules about what we are and aren't going to do and or feel, and so it's really about being on autopilot. Often I will, if I'm struggling or tense or I feel it in my body, I'll just slow down and try to pay attention. I will check in with my body, and often my body will tell me I'm tense, I am stressed, I am grieving, I am lonely, and then I have to make a choice. Like, your emotions are there, but we have stopped paying attention to them because society has told us that they're bad, most of them. And we only share the pretend good ones on Instagram, right? It's not like, hey, I was grieving today, want to see a photo? We don't. And yet, like in grief, in sadness, those are some of your deepest connections, but we often choose, to suppress our emotions. It's a different word than subdue, but suppress. And then we miss something about ourselves. And that's sad. Because when you miss that thing about yourself, it's going to come around again in another way. You're going to have to learn that same lesson again and open yourself up to, since my friend passed, the richness of grief has been wonderful and terrible. I've been taking my late best friend's kids out to do stuff, and his older son looks just like him. So it takes my breath away. But I take them fishing. We've been to the water slides. They've been for dinner. It's wonderful and beautiful and terrible. And yet I'm willing to have that combo in the name of being present with my friend's family, because I can't be present with my friends. It's not the natural human response to engage in that kind of behavior. We kind of shut those things down, right, and we avoid.
Okay, thanks so much, Nate. We're going to wrap it up here. I think I just want to thank you again for your time, for your presentation, for your honesty, your vulnerability with us. It's been so good just to hear from you and to be encouraged, informed, equipped. And just thank you for sharing a part of yourself with us today, Nate, and making that connection with us. We really appreciate that. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
What's your favorite kind of cake?
I actually don't like cake.
You were conning us the whole time. That was just a metaphor.
I came out as the example. It was the first thing that came out of my mouth, and I just ran with it. And I do like to eat, but cake is not my choice. I'm an ice cream sandwich kind of guy.
I was going to get you a big chocolate cake, Nate, but
All good.
It's going to be an ice cream sandwich now. Thank you, Nate. Let's give Nate a big hand.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to say thank you back because my hands were not capable of creating slides in a PowerPoint today, and I was scared to present to you today freestyle. But you're the first audience where haven't done the slides, and so I'm grateful for your time and your willingness to listen and maybe take some things home and practice. So thank you.